conversation with Baylor head coach Dave Aranda. But let's start with Tennessee, Alabama.
It was a fantastic game. Alabama has more problems on defense than I thought they ever would. Tennessee's offense is great. Their defense scares me, but they can win. Look, if you want to get in the shootout with them, they're going to take you down. Hendon Hooker was really impressive, especially in that last 16 seconds where usually that stuff works out for Alabama. It didn't. I wonder if there's maybe another loss or two on the schedule for Alabama because they do things – even with, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, there's a ton of penalties. The defense is vulnerable. They do dumb things that normally Alabama, the muff punt. Yeah. Alabama teams, Nick Saban teams don't do that. This one is, and I wonder what's in the future for them. Tennessee can enjoy this for a little while, but they still have Georgia coming down the line. They still have a lot of things happening. So, but they look really good, and, I hope that Knoxville is functioning after a 24-hour rest period.
Knoxville does not need to get behind a wheel of a car. Craig Smoak, your thoughts about 52-49?
Yeah, it was an incredible game. It was why we all watch and love college football. And hats off to the Tennessee Vols and their fans for what was an incredible, viewing experience. And I can only imagine of what it was like there in person. They have every right to be as excited as they seem to be and feel like the old days are back, although – as we pointed out, still a long way to go. I mean, we're halfway through the season at this point. So, I think they've taken the last couple of days to celebrate as much as possible and deserve to. And now it's on to the next one. Ultimately, you got to turn that page because you get stuck on just beating Bama and, you're going to get beat by a couple of teams and not end up where you'd like to end up ultimately. But, it was a long time coming for them. It was made out to be a big deal, and I'm glad that given the hype, the game lived up to the actual hype because that doesn't always happen. And I give a lot of credit to, Josh Heupel and his whole team. I mean, it was an incredible performance. And, this is what it's like to see what we used to watch with Baylor, basically on a bigger stage and what people thought this might be able to look like if, the Briles system was to get an opportunity against an Alabama and to have the types of athletes that Tennessee is able to get. What could that look like? Is it a gimmicky offense or is it something that could take down the Alabamas of the world? Well, it could be both. I think it is both. And maybe not gimmicky is the right word because that makes it sound cheap, but there is some gimmicks to it. There's no doubt about it. But, yeah, it works and it's effective and it's Heupel's own spin, of course. It's something that we've seen flashes of at, different stops for him. And he seems like he's, on top of his game and he's got the right players in tow and certainly tremendous backing. And here they are, as arguably one of the top teams in the country. I think for Alabama, I mean, you lose by 3, in extras and it's he had more penalties than you've ever had. You made a bunch of mistakes. And so I don't think that this Alabama team is suddenly like going to lose 3 games because they lost to Tennessee on Saturday night. But I do think that if they play that way, they're vulnerable in the SEC against teams like Georgia or a Tennessee or perhaps a couple of others as well.
As they almost were against Texas. Let's do the Alabama stat first, Garrett. And then TCU. Ari Wasserman, by the way, from theathletic.com was at that game, wrote about it. He'll join us today in the 5 o'clock hour. So this is the stat that this is from the broadcast. Paul mentioned this. Well, first of all, they ran back the fumble, which was as easy on the doorstep, pick it up and run into the end zone. They also had they just do this, and it's because they have incredible players on defense. But you can't say that when you give up 52. Alabama with 56, which is incredible, non-offensive touchdowns since the start of the 15 season. And San Diego State with 38 since the start of the 2000 and also 15 season. Now, to Tennessee and who they've beaten. Tennessee now has moved up to number 3. This is a great stat from Greg Harvey. Teams in college football history to start 6-0, beat 4 top 25 AP opponents, and on top of that, score 30-plus points in each of the first 6 games in a single season in college football history. You're looking at them, the 2022 Tennessee Vols. TCU is right there on the doorstep, just under that, but Tennessee has the 4.
Yeah, and their fans have to be super excited because it's been a long time. It is, if you think about it, January 3rd, 1999, when it was the day after they won the national title. And I thought about this. The day after you win your last national title is when your dive into irrelevancy begins. But you don't think of it that day. You're as happy as you can be on the day after. And then it's been 24 years of futility for them, really.
Yep.
They've had some okay teams, but to that standard
Yep.
that they had that day is not been there. And this is the first real win they've had in that time that makes you think that maybe, and again, it's still a maybe. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, that you could get back to national relevance again at Tennessee, which is one of the huge programs in the country.
They had an incredible crowd. It was unbelievable. Stormed the field and all that. They got fined $100,000 for that. And, of course, the goalposts are down. We're going to have a video on that. Now, the sports, 50 votes so far on the show, on the chat room. Is Tennessee a true national contender? 66% of you, 67 now, that just clicked over, say yes. 33% of you say no.
Have y'all seen the remainder of their schedule? How are they not? I mean, who's lining up to beat them outside of Georgia? I mean, if you look at the remainder of their schedule, they've got a pretty easy cakewalk to the SEC championship game outside of Georgia, of course, which it'll probably all come down to. But, I mean, they play Tennessee Martin this week. They play Kentucky. Now, I give Kentucky credit. They got Will Levis back, got a nice win over Mississippi State that we all should have seen coming. That's so typical of Leach to lose that game. But Kentucky will, perhaps pose a challenge if you're just looking at who could. But then Georgia. So you got Kentucky and Georgia back-to-back. Then Missouri, okay. South Carolina, all right. Vanderbilt, okay. I mean, that's it. So you got 2 games coming up here after this next one that could – one for sure will challenge you in Georgia. But outside of that, that's their schedule.
Yeah.
That's their remaining schedule.
If I said that you could walk 100 yards, but between you and the 100-yard marker, there's this thing called Godzilla, and that's Georgia. But right now, Tennessee believes in what they're doing. Now,
yeah, but that's better than saying there's no Mothra. There's there's just Godzilla versus like 4 other monsters that are in tow.
And you can lose that game being a part of the SEC and still be a part of the conversation, even if you don't play for the SEC title, because we've seen that before. Now, let's get to the Big 12.